Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to
Morning.
our latest coffee breaks. Morning.
Morning, everyone.
Well, with this latest one, we all thought we'd do something again, try to mix it up a bit and make it a little bit different. So I thought what we'd all do this time is just give a bit of an insight into some of the work that we're all working on at the moment, variety of work things that we're doing, and perhaps from my point of view, I perhaps might kick off first. And one of the things that I've just about to be instructed on is yet another valuation of a law firm. And this is a sole practitioner, in fact, who wants to admit two new partners. And they all get on very well. The two new partners are existing salaried partners. And in this scenario, they want to come in and they are all looking quite sensibly. They've had some advice from their accountants, which is a big firm, all looks very sensible, and looks as though we're going to have quite a reasonable deal. My role, as ever in this, is just to challenge the valuation, and the two areas that we're going to look at, one is the multiplier, and the other is the prior salaries to get to the bottom of what this firm's worth. The multiplier, they're suggesting 3, which is probably not out of all recognition. And the prior salaries, again, they look as though they're suggesting some sensible prior salaries, similar to what's being earned at the moment as fixed shares. But as ever, the big difficulty will be what's the maintainable profits when we get to look for the future and coming out of the pandemic.
Howard, these are always interesting, and I'd be fascinated to learn how long those two salaried partners have been there, how much of the work the firm does is effectively stuck to those two salaried partners, and how much of the firm's revenue is attached to the founding partner. Because unless the revenue effectively belonging to the founding partner is very, very significant, and I'm talking over 50%, I find it hard to get up to 3 as a multiplier.
That's very relevant, very relevant.
I mean, I think it's always relevant, isn't it, as to, the whole argument as to how do you get, if you're looking at valuing a law firm, how do you try and get the value into the firm rather than into the individuals? And it's sticky is sort of the holy grail, really, of law firm management.
It's the old question, isn't it? Is it a firm or a collection of individuals sharing overheads?
Yeah.
A bunch of screaming anarchists.
Okay,
so that's the description of Bennett Briegel, is it?
Well, there's only 2 of us, and we don't share a car park.
Well, okay, that's me. Mark, what about you? What are you doing at the moment?
You just reminded me, lots of stuff, as you're aware, plenty of merger activity, but interesting. So I had a call this week from someone, LLP, 2 partners, want to bring in want to make a couple of the current salaried partners who are employed up to fixed share members of the LLP. And of course, that's fine. And, all the stuff you've talked about in terms of valuation and what they're going to pay is crucial. What I'm moving on to is, well, currently 2 partners who are sort of sharing profits 60-40. If you bring 2 more in, you've got to work out how you're going to share the profits. But the real issues that I think we're going to about is around voting rights. So effectively, you've got one person whose firm it was, who's brought somebody in who still has a control. Then you get into all those interesting issues that have to go into the LLP agreement in terms of, well, what decisions require what majority? So if you bring in a couple more, there's 4. Is it a simple majority? Is it weighted? Is it weighted by equity? What decisions require which input? So moving from 2 to 3 is really interesting, because you're suddenly changing the whole dynamic of the firm, and if you're not careful, you can end up giving the very junior person complete control, because they could have the casting vote on something, whereas actually you don't want that. So,
and presumably even as it's a relatively new one, you're still bringing in your famous Red Sox clause.
Well, yes, but the famous Red Sox clause, no fault expulsion, or compulsory retirement is the preferred phrase these days. We tend to stick to expulsion is for fault. in terms of, you've been raiding the petty cash, whereas compulsory retirement is, we've just decided you don't fix. So that's fine, but it probably, you'd want to move on, Howard, to have some controls on that, because the person whose firm it was, who currently has got about 60%, might want to preclude the others ganging up on him or her and moving them out. So you can put in the Red Sox clause, but maybe exclude founding partners.
I remember in one we had, and we were talking to Nigel about this, Nigel's suggestion of a sunset clause for that sort of document. Do you want to just mention that, Nigel? Because it was the first time I came across it.
Well, yes, I mean, I think what Mark's just alluded to was going through my mind as he was talking. The founding partner will not want a Red Sox clause in there if it can be used against him or her.
Yeah.
But he might feel, if he or she is in their late 50s, that a sunset clause that enables people to compulsorily retire him or her in 8 or 9 years is absolutely fine, but just not now when I'm at the peak of my earnings.
Yep, absolutely.
Right, thank you, Mark. Who's going next? I think it was going to be Nigel.
Okay.
What have you been up to?
To go next.
Yeah.
And what I've been doing, in fact, haven't quite finished this week, is the first full pricing masterclass since in between lockdowns 1 and 2, when I did a couple out in the real world. So what I've found on the pricing side is firms have been booking their pricing training and postponing it until it's appropriate to do it face to face. And there's the firm that I'm working with this week initially booked in for last April. We've postponed it about 3 times. And they decided pre-Christmas that the February dates we would go ahead with, come what may, and we would almost certainly do it online. So I've done lots of small training sessions and reduced and modified versions. But this is the first time I've ever done my full 3-day course online. And I've almost doubled my input. So normally on my 3-day course, I do about 11 hours of training. And on this one, I'm doing about 16 and a half. And one of the things that is interesting and why I'm mentioning it is I've broken down the cohort into 2 groups. So I do an introductory session for everybody and then get into the meat of training in smaller groups of about 7 or 8 people. And that way you can get the interactivity, you can just about read some body language. You've got time for some interesting byways to explore and some stories to tell. And for the first time, since I've been doing any online training at all, I actually feel quite satisfied with the product that's been delivered. I don't think the gap between this and face-to-face training has been that big. The key for me is size of group. Happy to do 15, 16 in the real world, prefer 7 or 8 online.
Yeah.
What's the impact on you personally in terms of concentration and tiredness? The longest I've done is I've done a 3.5-hour slot jointly with one other person. And it felt as though I'd been working for 8 hours solidly like that.
I can imagine. I've never done anything that long, Howard. In the training I've done this week, and I've got an hour to go straight after this call, I did an 1.5 hour session to kick off, and all the others have been 75 minutes.
Thanks for that, Nigel and Mark. Barry, what have you been up to?
Well, there's a couple of things, and they're very, very different to each other at the moment. But my colleague John Humferson and I, and particularly John, I'll give credit where it's due, have developed a whole suite of business intelligence information that's specifically oriented to the medium-sized law firm, which provides data in a visible format, in a visual format, which it's not quite the sort of Hans Rosling standard, if you've ever seen his stuff, but it's not far off. And so taking simple reports and making them dynamic and visual. And I think one of the things that Nigel was saying is it's the kind of thing which allows the managing partner to reorient their priorities, because you only focus on the things that need focusing on. And so it's moving from having dry information in numbers and static charts into dynamic information that actually prompts action. And we always talk about it from data to results. You don't get the results unless you actually get the action. And so the data-driven firm, not data-dominated, but actually instead of managing by gut feel, you're managing from hard and fast numbers. And John's a genius.
Yeah. Have you got any evidence, Barry, of how that sort of information is driving performance and improving results?
Yeah, we're tracking that. The first one we did with that started probably about 18 months ago, and they've benefited enormously because they would have had an awful time with COVID. Yeah, we're up to we've got 5 live installations, and they're all happily providing testimonials and references. And it looks good, Nigel, doesn't it?
Well, Barry, you're underselling it, if anything. And I think this is genuinely quite an exciting tool that I think most of the firms in that segment of the market that we all tend to work in, here in Mosaic, I think it would be attractive to many of those firms.
Yeah,
it really does provide, in graphic format, actionable insights, and I think it enables you to push back with granular detail when a head of department says we can't do that because, or you don't understand how it is with us. I think you've got it straight away.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So,
well, thank you, Barry. Thank you for that. That completes our first round of what we're all doing, and watch out for our second round of what we're all doing. So.